The room was quiet except for the faint hum of machinery and the rhythmic tapping of Liam's fingers against his tablet. The team was gathered in the main operations hub of the facility, a space brimming with holographic displays, live data feeds, and the constant buzz of encrypted communications. It was time to finalize their plan, but tension hung thick in the air. Ethan stood near the center, his hand resting lightly on the desk that displayed the prototype schematics. He could feel every gaze on him, his family, Alden, Harris, the engineers, and Kane, all waiting for him to speak. He inhaled deeply, his shoulders rising and falling as he faced the group. The propulsion system, Ethan began, his voice steady but edged with exhaustion. It's not just a power source. The prototype can generate an energy signature unlike anything DARC has ever seen before, something powerful enough to disrupt their surveillance nodes and fracture their communication grid. If we activate it here, their entire infrastructure collapses, and they won't even be able to see, let alone shut down, the national broadcast. Sophia's eyes widened, and Liam straightened in his seat. Harris raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. Kane's gaze sharpened. You're saying the prototype isn't just a propulsion system. It is a weapon. Ethan shook his head. Not a weapon. A tool. But using it comes at a cost. He paused, letting the weight of his next word settle. It's unstable. Activating the prototype under these conditions could destroy it completely. And if that happens, everything we've worked toward, all future advancements, could be lost until I build another one, and I may know exactly how to build it, but the testing and the setup takes time. The room fell silent, everyone processing the gravity of the decision. Liam leaned forward, his expression intense. But if you don't activate it, DARC wins. They regroup, and all of this really would be for nothing. I know, Ethan replied quietly. Sophia stepped closer, her voice cutting through the uncertainty. Ethan, you can't take this all on yourself. This is why we're here, why we've all come together. This decision, this fight, it's not just yours. Ethan met her gaze, his jaw tightening. It feels like it is, he admitted. It feels like everything rests on me. Sophia placed her hand on his arm, her voice soft but firm. It doesn't. You're not alone. You have me. You have Liam, Maya, all these people. Look at what your invention did. Look at all these different people it brought together. Whatever happens, we're in this together, and you did the right thing. Liam stepped up beside them, nodding. Mom's right. Maya peeked around the corner, clutching her bunny as she stepped into the room. Her small voice broke the tension like a beam of light. Daddy's going to stop the bad guys. Ethan turned to look at her, his heart squeezing as she smiled up at him, completely trusting. Sophia pulled her into her arms, holding her tightly as Ethan took another deep breath. Finally, he straightened, his resolve hardening. All right, we'll activate the prototype, but we must be ready for what comes after. Harris smirked faintly. We'll be ready. Alden nodded, his voice calm but purposeful. And once DARC falls, there's no turning back. The team moved swiftly, preparing for the operation with renewed focus. The risks were immense, but they knew this was their chance, their moment to change everything. Deep within DARC's central operations hub, the tension was palpable. Monitors displayed rapidly shifting data streams, and voices echoed across the sleek, metallic room as analysts scrambled to regain control. Their network had been blind for hours, an eternity in their world. Director Talon stood in the center of the chaos, his presence cold and commanding. Status, Talon snapped, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. Marlowe can turn to him, her expression strained. The false data loop is still active. We've isolated the source to their facility, but the network disruptions have delayed our infiltration teams. It's taking longer to pinpoint their exact location. Talon's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer. Longer isn't an option. Deploy all available resources. I want boots on the ground yesterday. Yes, sir, Marlowe replied, her voice tight, before turning back to her console. Talon's gaze shifted to another monitor, displaying an internal feed of a heated argument between two senior operatives. It was a stark reminder of the fractures in their leadership. The more aggressive faction, led by Talon, pushed for immediate action, an all-out offensive to regain control. But the other faction, wary of exposing themselves further, advocated a slower, more calculated response. The cracks had never been this visible, and Talon's fury grew with every passing second. He knew Alden was at the heart of this. Reeves, the man who had basically built everything they were, now dared to dismantle it. "Sir," another analyst called out, her tone urgent. "We've intercepted a communication from inside the facility. It's encoded, but it's routed through Reeves' old protocols. He's pulling information from our system, and it's being fed back to them." Talon's expression darkened further. "Reeves," he muttered under his breath. "The traitor thinks he's untouchable." Marlowe hesitated before speaking. "Sir, with all due respect, if they've managed to blind our systems this effectively, shouldn't we consider what?" Talon interrupted, his voice icy. "Consider negotiating? Consider backing down?" Marlowe straightened, her face pale. "No, sir. I just mean we should proceed with caution. They've outmaneuvered us at every step." Talon stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Caution is for cowards, Analyst Kent. We've been patient long enough. Launch the breach teams now. If they can't take the facility, they'll burn it to the ground." "Yes, sir," Marlowe said quietly, though the doubt in her eyes betrayed her unease. As the analysts scrambled to carry out his orders, Talon's mind raced. He couldn't let this slip away. DARC's power, his power, depended on their ability to control the narrative. If the Caldwells and their allies succeeded in exposing them, it wouldn't just be the end of DARC. It would be the end of him. For the first time in years, Talon felt the edges of his control slipping. And for the first time, he realized he was fighting not just to maintain power, but to survive. Sir," Marlowe said warily. "We've received a message from the facility." "What?" the director said. "While the facility is getting our information, they're leaving this in its place," she said. There, on the monitor, was a location. It was the very place he was standing, and a message that read, "Director Talon, this is Ethan Caldwell. I am ready to give you what you want. I am bringing the propulsion system to you, and I want this to stop immediately. I want my family and myself to be left alone forever. No matter what, you will promise not to come after any of us or anything we ever do again. Meet at 0500. This was the first good news the director had received in days. The atmosphere in the Alliance's operations hub was electric with anticipation. Holographic displays showed the growing chaos within DARC systems, blinded surveillance feeds, conflicting data streams, and erratic communications. Liam's false data loop had done its job, forcing DARC into disarray. Now, the team was preparing for the final blow. Ethan stood by a hologram of the propulsion system's prototype, the intricate schematics rotating slowly in front of him. Despite DARC's flailing systems, the risk of activating the prototype in their facility loomed large. He adjusted the parameters on the simulation one last time, his face a mixture of determination and trepidation. Sophia joined him, her voice steady but soft. "Liam's loop has them scrambling, Ethan. It's working. We have the advantage." "It's not enough yet," Ethan replied, his brow furrowing as he stared at the hologram. "If the prototype fails, if the signal doesn't break their network completely, what if the simulation is wrong and I destroy my life's work?" "It will work," Sophia said firmly. "It has to. We've come too far for it not to. Trust yourself." Across the room, Liam tapped furiously at his tablet, fine-tuning the loop to keep DARC chasing ghosts. "They're losing control faster than I expected," he called out. "The blind spots are spreading through their network. If we hit them now, they'll never recover." Alden stood near the tactical console, his gaze fixed on the live feed from DARC's hub. The fractured leadership was evident in every intercepted message, contradictory orders, desperate attempts to re-establish control. He gestured toward the screen. "Talon's grip is slipping, but don't underestimate him. He's ruthless, and he'll burn that facility to the ground before he lets us take it." Harris approached, his posture tense, but confident. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. The strike team is ready to move. We'll be in and out before they even know we're there. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over his family and the team around him. The risks were immense, but so was the opportunity. All right, he said finally. Let's end this. I will get the prototype from my lab and go to the DARC facility to talk to Director Talon. Alden crossed his arms, his expression calm but calculating. DARC is expecting us at their facility. They won't be watching your lab as closely anymore. They think you've already abandoned it. That gives us a window, Liam added, glancing up from his tablet. The false data loop is still feeding them misinformation. We can use it to mask our movements. Kane turned to the group, addressing them with authority. All right, it's decided. Ethan will go to the lab with a small security detail to pick up the prototype and make the meeting. Harris and Alden will set up their strike teams outside of monitorable distance around their facility and wait until the word that the prototype has knocked out their systems fully. Sophia, you need to get ready for your broadcast. Liam, you make sure this loop keeps working. The teams need as much time as you can give them. Ethan was anxious about having to leave his family. It was the first time since all this started, and he still had a hard time trusting anyone but him to keep them safe. He first approached Sophia and hugged her tightly before kissing her. When he pulled away and looked into her eyes, he saw the love that was always there and something that made his own resolve grow. Go, she said. I love you. Next, Liam. He walked up behind his son, who was at the same workstation he had been basically since they arrived. He put his hand on his shoulder to get his attention, and when Liam looked at him, he pulled him in for a tight hug. Son, all of this has come together because you figured out how to get us out. We wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for you, Ethan said with an emotional intensity. Liam's eyes welled up a bit as he said, Thank you, Dad. He took a depth, calming breath and continued to say, Now let's get this finished. I'm ready to go home. Both Ethan and Liam chuckled softly to ease the tension they were both feeling. Ethan went to where Maya was coloring and listening to music playing softly with her bunny. Hey, baby girl, come here. Give Daddy a hug. He has to go for a little while, he said in a voice choked with emotion. Maya came bouncing into his open arms, throwing her own tiny ones around his neck. Ethan squeezed her hard, maybe harder than he needed to, and kissed the top of her head. I love you, baby girl, he said before letting her go reluctantly. And with that, it was time to go. Ethan looked at his family one last time before leaving the operations hub. They were the reason he was doing this. No matter what, he didn't want his children to grow up in a world controlled by DARC, or any entity like them for that matter. It was now or never, and he was not going to fail. The strike team boarded their vehicles, sleek transports equipped with cloaking technology to mask their approach. Ethan was in the transport van with his security detail, heading to his lab, where all this began. Harris and Alden were with their respective strike teams on their way to the facility to set up for the strike. There would be no time to waste as soon as the propulsion system was activated. There was no room for error. They only had one shot, and they weren't going to fail. As the strike teams rolled toward DARC's facility, the chaos within the agency's walls deepened. Talon barked orders that fell on deaf ears, his operatives scrambling to respond to the blinding disruptions tearing through their network. They had no idea that the final strike was already on its way. The convoy moved through the deserted streets under the cover of darkness, cloaked transports blending seamlessly into the night. The atmosphere inside the lead vehicle was tense, every mile bringing Ethan closer to his lab, and the key to dismantling DARC for good. Harris, riding in another transport toward DARC's facility, stayed in constant communication with Ethan, his voice sharp and deliberate over the comms. We'll be in position by the time you retrieve the prototype, Harris said, his tone leaving no room for error. No delays, Ethan. You need to make that meeting. I understand, Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the anxiety twisting in his chest. His thoughts lingered on his family, on the moment he had left them behind for the first time since this nightmare began. He couldn't fail them, Not now, not ever. The transport carrying Ethan and the security team approached the lab. The building stood like a relic of another life, its exterior untouched since the night his family fled. The security detail exited first, moving quickly to secure the perimeter. Ethan followed, his heart pounding as he stepped into the dimly lit space that had once been his sanctuary of innovation. "All clear," one of the guards called out. Ethan nodded and stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the lab. Everything was exactly as he had left it, from the scattered notes on his desk to the containment unit housing the propulsion system prototype. The hum of the containment field was steady, a faint but familiar sound that grounded him. "Let's move fast," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the quiet. He approached the unit, his hands working deftly to stabilize the prototype for transport. The engineers accompanying him moved in to assist, carefully dismantling the containment field and securing the system. As they worked, Ethan's mind raced. He had designed this system to revolutionize energy and exploration, never imagining it would become the centerpiece of a fight for freedom. The weight of its potential and its dangers pressed heavily on him. "Almost ready," one of the engineers said, his voice calm but focused. 2 minutes to stabilize." Ethan nodded, glancing around the lab once more. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and his pulse quickened. He turned sharply toward the entrance, just as the security detail moved into defensive positions. "We've got company," one of the guards reported, their voice tight over the comms. "Unmarked vehicles approaching from the north." Ethan's stomach dropped. DARC had anticipated this. "We hold the line," the guard continued. "Dr. Caldwell, stay with the prototype." The team's training kicked in as they set up a defensive perimeter around the lab. The faint sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor leading to the entrance. Ethan crouched beside the containment unit, his hands steady as he finished the final adjustments. The engineers worked beside him, their movements quick and precise. The first shots rang out, shattering the stillness. DARC's recon team had arrived, their approach swift and unrelenting. Ethan's security detail returned fire, their movements calculated and efficient. The lab became a battleground, the hum of the prototype's containment field a constant backdrop to the chaos. "Almost there," an engineer shouted, their voice cutting through the noise. "Just hold them off a little longer." Ethan glanced toward the guards, his heart pounding as he watched them hold their ground. He could see the determination in their eyes, the understanding that this mission was bigger than any one of them. "We're good," the engineer called out. "Prototype is secure and ready for transport." Ethan rose to his feet, his resolve hardening. "Let's move," he shouted, motioning for the team to retreat toward the transport. The engineers carried the prototype with utmost care, its containment unit glowing faintly in the dark. The guards covered their retreat, their movements precise as they pushed back against the recon team. Ethan climbed into the transport, his heart racing as the prototype was loaded behind him. The vehicle roared to life, speeding away from the lab just as reinforcements arrived on the scene. As the transport sped toward DARC's facility, Ethan took a moment to steady his breathing. He closed his eyes, the faces of his family flashing in his mind. This was for them, for Sophia, for Liam, for Maya, and for everyone who deserved a world free from DARC's shadow. Over the comms, Harris's voice broke through the static. "You've got the prototype." "We've got it," Ethan replied, his voice steady with newfound determination. "We're on our way." The air outside the DARC facility was unnaturally still, as though the building itself held its breath. The enormous structure loomed in the darkness, its sleek exterior reflecting the faint glow of distant lights. Ethan sat in the front passenger seat of the transport vehicle as it came to a halt at the edge of the facility's sprawling complex. Beside him, the two engineers fidgeted nervously, their unease palpable. "This is it," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to the others. He took a deep breath, steadying his resolve. His heart raced, but he kept his expression calm. The security detail he had arrived with had already moved to rendezvous with Harris and Alden's strike teams, leaving him and the engineers to carry the prototype into the heart of DARC's command. "You're sure this is the right move?" one of the engineers asked, his voice tight with anxiety. Ethan turned to him, his gaze steady. "This is the only move. Talon won't expect me to walk in like this. We need to keep him distracted long enough for the strike teams to get into position. You focus on keeping the prototype safe. I'll handle Talon." The engineers exchanged a glance, but nodded, their trust in Ethan outweighing their fear. They exited the vehicle, the cold night air biting at their skin. Ethan carried the prototype in its stabilized containment unit, its faint hum a constant reminder of the power it held. The three of them approached the facility's main entrance, where a team of DARC operatives waited, their weapons lowered, but their presence anything but welcoming. One of the operatives stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Caldwell," he said, his tone clipped. "Director Talon is waiting for you." Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on the containment unit. "Let's get this over with." They were escorted into the facility, the stark, sterile corridors illuminated by cold, fluorescent lights. The oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Ethan's mind raced as he calculated every possible outcome, every contingency. The prototype was their last hope, and he couldn't afford to falter. The operatives led them to a massive, windowless room at the center of the facility. A single table stood in the middle, flanked by chairs on either side. Monitors lined the walls, displaying fragments of data from DARC's faltering systems, an unsettling reminder of Liam's loop wreaking havoc within their network. Director Eric Talon stood on the far side of the room, his imposing figure framed by the cold glow of the monitors. His presence was as commanding as ever, his sharp eyes locking onto Ethan the moment he entered. "Dr. Caldwell," Talon said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "You've come a long way. I wasn't sure you'd make it this far." Ethan placed the containment unit on the table, his expression unflinching. "You gave me plenty of reasons to keep going." Talon smirked faintly, his hands clasped behind his back as he stepped closer. "And yet, here you are, walking into the lion's den. Brave or foolish?" "Neither," Ethan replied coolly. "You wanted my work, Talon. Well, here it is. Let's talk about what happens next." Talon studied him for a moment, his sharp gaze shifting briefly to the prototype. "You've been quite the thorn in my side, you and your resourceful family. But you've underestimated me, Caldwell. You think you've outmaneuvered DARC? You've only delayed the inevitable." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice low but firm. "The inevitable is already happening, Talon. Your systems are failing. Your operatives are scrambling. Everything you've built is collapsing." Talon's smirk faltered, but only for a fraction of a second. "You think you've won just because you've sown a little chaos. DARC is bigger than one facility, one director. You don't understand what you're fighting." "Don't I?" Ethan countered, his eyes narrowing. "I understand perfectly. You want control over people, over innovation, over the future. But you can't control everything, Talon. Not anymore." Before Talon could respond, the hum of the prototype grew louder, its containment field flickering faintly. Ethan's heart raced as he realized the engineers were already preparing the activation sequence. The signal needed to go live at the perfect moment, and the strike teams had to be ready. Talon noticed the change as well, his expression darkening. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. Ethan straightened, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Ending this." The strike teams lay in wait just outside of DARC's facility, their vehicles hidden from any remaining surveillance that might still function despite Liam's devastating data loop. Harris crouched with his team behind a row of abandoned shipping containers, his rifle slung over his shoulder. His sharp eyes scanned the structure ahead, the stillness of the night amplifying the tension around them. "Any sign of movement?" he murmured into his comms. "Negative," came the hushed reply from one of his scouts. "Facility looks quiet, but I don't trust it." "Neither do I," Harris muttered. He turned to Alden, who stood nearby, his focus fixed on a handheld terminal displaying updates from the Alliance's ops hub. "Everything's still on schedule." Harris asked. Alden nodded, though his expression was tense. Ethan's inside with the prototype. The signal should go live any moment now. Harris exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around his weapon, and the second it does, we move. The teams were split into 3 groups, each assigned to breach and secure different sections of the facility once the propulsion system's signal disrupted DARC's remaining defenses. Harris led one team, Alden another, and the third was under the command of a sergeant named Jordan Malik, Kane's most experienced operative. The coordination had to be perfect. Any misstep could give Talon time to counter. In the distance, a low hum began to build, faint but growing steadily louder. Harris's comm crackled to life, Liam's voice coming through with quiet urgency. The prototype's about to activate. Systems are destabilizing. They won't be able to track you for long. Understood, Harris replied, signaling to his team. Everyone ready? Around him, the strike team members nodded, their faces resolute. Harris tightened his grip on his rifle. Let's move. The team surged forward, their movements swift and precise. Cloaked by the chaos of DARC's crumbling systems, they advanced on the facility's outer perimeter. As they breached the gates, the first signs of disarray became apparent. Lights flickered erratically, and the usually impeccable security systems lagged or failed entirely. The signal from Ethan's prototype was working. Harris led his team through the eastern wing, their steps silent as they cleared each hallway. DARC operatives scrambled to respond, their coordination hindered by the very systems they relied on. Shots rang out sporadically, brief skirmishes erupting as the strike team pushed deeper into the facility. Meanwhile, Alden's team breached the western wing, their objective to secure the control center and seize critical data. Alden moved with an efficiency that surprised even the seasoned operatives around him. His knowledge of DARC's layout and protocols gave them an edge, allowing them to outmaneuver the scattered defenses. Control center ahead, Alden said, his voice calm despite the tension. 2 guards at the entrance. Neutralize them quietly. The operatives moved in, taking out the guards with practiced precision. Within moments, they had breached the control center, quickly downloading data from DARC's core systems and locking out what little control Talon might still have had. On the northern side, Malik's team secured the facility's power core, ensuring that DARC couldn't reroute power to any backup systems. The operatives worked quickly, setting charges to disable key infrastructure without destroying critical evidence. As the teams converged on the central command center, Harris's comm came alive again. This is Alden. We've secured the control center and extracted the data. Talon's cut off. Good, Harris replied. We're almost at the command room. Get ready to meet us there. The strike teams pushed forward, the sound of their movements blending with the hum of the propulsion system's signal reverberating through the facility. Talon's forces were cornered, their retreat cut off, and their systems failing. The operation was going according to plan, but Harris knew better than to relax. The most dangerous part was still ahead. As they approached the command room, Harris raised his fist, signaling his team to stop. He turned to Alden, who had joined them moments earlier, his expression grim. This is it. Alden nodded, his voice low. Talon's in there. He won't go down without a fight. Harris smirked faintly, his rifle steady in his hands. Good. I've been waiting for this. With a silent signal, the teams prepared for the final breach. The door to the command room burst open, the strike teams surging inside with precision. Harris took point, his movements sharp as he scanned the room for Talon. Monitors flickered with distorted data streams, Liam's loop still wreaking havoc on DARC systems. Talon stood at the far end of the room, his hands resting on the table, his knuckles white against the metal surface. Harris leveled his rifle at Talon, his voice firm. It's over. Talon smirked faintly, his expression tight but defiant. Over? You think you've won? You don't know what you're fighting. Before Harris could respond, a monitor on the wall lit up, displaying Sophia's face as a live broadcast began. Her voice was steady, ringing clear across the facility and beyond. This is Sophia Caldwell, she said, her tone resolute. Today we exposed the truth about DARC. For years, they have operated in the shadows, manipulating decentralized systems to consolidate power, controlling individuals and governments alike. But no more. The broadcast showed images of encrypted files, surveillance records, and intercepted communications, all evidence of DARC's corruption. Sophia's words cut through Talon's bravado like a blade, her conviction undeniable. Harris smirked faintly, his rifle unwavering. Looks like the world knows now. Talon's smirk faltered, his composure breaking for the first time. You think this changes anything? DARC isn't just a name. It's an idea, a network. It can't be destroyed. It already is, Alden said from behind Harris, his voice calm but sharp. And you're going with it. Talon tensed, his gaze darting between the strike team members, closing in around him. Harris stepped closer, his rifle still trained on him. Director Talon, you're under arrest. You can come quietly, or we'll make sure you don't come at all. The strike team moved in swiftly, securing Talon and the remaining operatives in the room. Sophia's broadcast continued, her voice carrying the weight of their victory. With this evidence, we dismantle DARC's operations, Sophia declared, and we ensure that no organization like this ever rises again. As Talon was escorted out of the room, his defiance faded, replaced by the grim understanding that DARC's reign had come to an end. Harris exchanged a glance with Alden, the two of them sharing a rare moment of silent agreement. The mission was complete. The strike teams regrouped outside the facility, the air thick with the aftermath of their victory. DARC's operatives were being rounded up, their weapons confiscated, their communications silenced. The once imposing structure now stood as a hollow shell, its power dismantled piece by piece. Harris leaned against one of the transport vehicles, his rifle slung over his shoulder as he watched the security teams secure the last of the prisoners. His sharp gaze flicked to Alden, who stood nearby, his tablet in hand as he reviewed the extracted data from DARC systems. You did good in there, Harris said finally, his tone begrudging but sincere. Alden glanced up, his expression unreadable. Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment. Harris smirked faintly, shaking his head. Don't get used to it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of their shared history. Harris crossed his arms, his voice quieter now. You know, I didn't think I'd ever trust you again. After what happened, after what DARC did to my team, I didn't think you'd ever be on the right side of this. Alden's jaw tightened, his gaze dropping to the tablet in his hands. I didn't think I'd be on the right side either. But I couldn't keep living with what I'd done, what I'd helped them do. This was the only way to make it right. Harris studied him for a moment, his sharp eyes softening just slightly. Well, you did. Doesn't mean I'll forget, but you did. Alden nodded, his voice quiet but steady. I don't expect you to forget, but I'm glad we got here. Harris extended a hand, his expression still guarded, but carrying a hint of respect. Alden hesitated briefly before taking it, their handshake firm and brief. Don't screw it up, Harris said, his smirk returning. Wouldn't dream of it, Alden replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The moment passed, but the grudging respect between them lingered, a recognition of the roles they'd played in dismantling DARC and the sacrifices it had taken to get there. Though their past grievances remained, they both understood that this victory was bigger than either of them. The Caldwell family found themselves in a quiet corner of the facility as the chaos of the operation gave way to a stillness they hadn't felt in months. The hum of distant machinery and the muffled sounds of the security teams completing their sweep were the only noises that reached them. For the first time in what felt like forever, they could breathe. Ethan sat on the edge of a metal crate, his shoulders hunched as he rested his elbows on his knees. His hands were clasped loosely together, but the weight of the journey hung heavy in his posture. Sophia joined him, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. She didn't say anything at first, letting the moment settle, her presence grounding him. Maya curled up beside her, leaning against her mother with her bunny clutched in her arms. Liam, his tablet finally set aside, walked over and sat across from them, his expression thoughtful. The tension in his face had eased somewhat, but the determination that had carried him through the mission remained. "We did it," Liam said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of disbelief, as though he was still processing the enormity of what they had accomplished. Ethan nodded, his gaze distant. "Yeah," he murmured. "We did." Sophia reached for his hand, her fingers weaving through his. "And we're still standing," she said gently, her tone carrying the warmth and reassurance he hadn't realized he needed. "That's all that matters." Maya tilted her head up toward her father, her wide eyes shining. "You stopped the bad guys, Daddy," she said with a small smile. "Now we can go home, right?" Ethan's chest tightened as he looked at her, his voice rough with emotion. "Yeah, baby girl, we can go home." Liam leaned back against the wall, exhaling deeply. "You know, when all of this started, I didn't think we'd get here. I didn't think we'd make it out of the city, let alone take down DARC." Ethan looked at him, his gaze steady. "You made this happen, Liam. You figured out how to outsmart them, how to keep us safe. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." Liam's face softened, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thanks, Dad," he said quietly. Sophia's voice cut through, calm but firm. "It wasn't just Liam, though. We did this together, all of us. We didn't give up. That's why we're here." Ethan glanced at her, then at his children. The enormity of everything they had sacrificed and fought for hitting him all at once. "We're here," he repeated softly, almost to himself. "And we're together. That's all that matters." The family sat in silence for a moment longer, letting the weight of the past months settle. They had endured so much pain, fear, loss, but they had come out the other side stronger, united, and ready to face whatever came next. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a question mark. It felt like a promise. 2 months later, the world watched as Ethan Caldwell stepped onto the stage, flanked by the corporation's representatives, engineers, and the alliance team that had worked tirelessly to dismantle DARC. Cameras flashed, broadcasting the moment live to billions across the globe. Sophia stood in the front row, her hand resting on Maya's shoulder, while Liam adjusted his headset to hear his father's words clearly. Ethan approached the podium, his hands gripping the edges briefly as he steadied his breath. The room quieted, an electric anticipation crackling through the air. He began, "My name is Ethan Caldwell, and I stand before you not as an inventor, but as a father, a husband, and a human being who believes in the boundless potential of humanity. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter, not just for my family, not just for America, but for the world." He paused, the weight of his words settling over the audience. 250 years ago, our nation faced a turning point. Americans voted for leaders who believed that the federal government had to be downsized to protect individual liberties. It was a monumental shift, a reclamation of personal agency and freedom that sparked an era of innovation and prosperity unlike any other. Communities thrived as power was decentralized. Local governments worked hand in hand with citizens to solve problems, creating infrastructure tailored to their unique needs. Economic independence flourished as barriers to entrepreneurship dissolved, allowing everyday people to contribute their talents without fear of overreach. Technological breakthroughs surged as innovators were empowered to dream bigger, free from the constraints of bureaucratic systems. And the face of governance itself transformed, focusing on transparency, accountability, and direct engagement with the people it served. Ethan's voice grew stronger, carrying a quiet pride that resonated deeply. It was this foundation, the belief in the power of individuals to shape their own futures, that set the stage for everything we've achieved since. And yet, as with any era of progress, shadows emerged. Entities like DARC sought to take back what was given, using fear and manipulation to impose control. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze sweeping the audience. "But today we reclaim that freedom. Today we dismantle the shadows and step into the light." Ethan turned to the containment unit beside him, its polished surface gleaming under the stage lights. The hum of the prototype was faint but audible. He placed his hand on it, his expression softening. "This," he said, his voice carrying reverence. This is the Deuterium Advanced Reactor Core Hellion V drive, or the DARC HV drive. For years, it was my dream to create a propulsion system that could change the way we explore the stars, a drive capable of harnessing fusion energy to power humanity's next great journey. And today, that dream becomes reality. This isn't just propulsion, it is a bridge to the stars. The DARC drive isn't just a technological achievement, it's a promise that humanity can achieve greatness without sacrificing its freedoms. A promise that we can innovate, explore, and thrive without being bound by control or fear. This drive will allow us to reach farther than we ever have, to explore planets and systems that were once beyond our grasp. It will usher in an era where the stars are not just distant lights, but destinations, opportunities, and new beginnings. Ethan's voice softened, his tone carrying a quiet humility. But this is not something I do alone. This era is ushered in by the partnership between our team and the corporation that believed in my vision, Paragon Dynamics. And this isn't just an American innovation, it's a global effort. Scientists, engineers, leaders, and dreamers from all over the world will join forces to ensure this technology benefits all of humanity. He straightened, his resolve clear in his eyes. We've seen what happens when power is concentrated, when systems are built to control rather than uplift. Today, we choose a different path. The DARC drive isn't just a machine. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we work together, when we believe in each other, when we fight for the freedom to reach beyond what we know. Ethan stepped back from the podium, his gaze lingering on his family for a moment before turning to the audience. Once more, the stars are waiting. Let's go meet them. Applause erupted, the sound carrying across the room and reverberating through the screens, broadcasting the moment to the world. Ethan stepped down from the stage, greeted by Sophia's warm embrace and the excited smiles of Liam and Maya. This wasn't just an end. It was the beginning of something far greater.